your upbringing like? What was your childhood like?
Back to my childhood. Time travel. It's a long time ago. Manchester in the 50s was pretty bleak, as I think a lot of cities were. So local schools, only child, felt quite what's the word? I don't know, isolated, because my refuge was next door. We had an Irish Catholic family with four very attractive girls and a son who turned out to be a good friend of mine. But that was my escape from the kind of only child isolation, really. Just everything seemed so free and easy, and they was laughing all the time. So that was my second family in a way. So that was an escape route. And my dad was a pretty good piano player, semi-pro. Used to play in dance bands and things, and my mum was a good singer. I had quite a strong musical background. My grandmother was in, concert parties. And all my dad's brothers played piano, so it was inevitable that I would be sent for piano lessons, which I was, and quite enjoyed. Didn't practice very much, so it's like quick hour before I was due to go on the day I had to go, But the woman that taught me was interesting because she was actually mainly a great accordion player. So while I was playing her my piece from last week, she was actually sat there writing my new piece out on manuscript by hand while I was playing stuff back to her. And she was quite progressive in the sense that if a pupil didn't really seem to take very well to doing theory, she would quietly drop it and start giving you pop tunes instead of neoclassical and standard, children's kind of pieces from the sort of semi-classical repertoire, which was great because I could impress my friends at school, by playing what was pop music of the day. So I kept that going. I went for piano lessons until I was about 14, I think, something like that. But at 11, I went to secondary school, and the literature teacher was the director of a youth theatre in Manchester, and was looking for likely people that might be interested. So I joined that. Started off as a 11-year-old spear carrier in, Hamlet and various other crazy things. But I really got the bug for it. So that was a real freedom thing. Yeah. Because I was going out 2 or 3 nights to rehearse, and then there was a week of shows, and I got independence through that, and it was great for confidence and stuff. And also the musical thing was still happening because the theatre group had its own band, so I was like the second piano player for that band, and it was just a great breakout from the claustrophobia of nothing wrong with my family. It's just that there's a certain point when as we all know, when you need to get out a bit. So and I met people there, and that eventually Tony Cassidy, particularly, who was the singer in the St. Louis Union, we met and became friends, through that. So that was the start of me being in real bands, meeting up with Tony, and then started going into Manchester of an evening when we were about 16. Found the Left Wing coffee bar, a bit of a lefty beatnik place, and we met the rest or part of the band, the guitar player and the bass player, just going back on the all-night bus at night, and that's how the St. Louis came together. So that's my childhood, kind of up to 17, 18, really. Okay,
yeah, because you had quite a bit of success with that band, didn't you, with the St. Louis Union? Because you won a competition, the Melody Maker competition, didn't you?
Correct, yeah. So that was, in a lot of ways, it was a good thing. But the bad thing was our agent. We got, after that, certain doors opened apart from getting a recording contract. But we got signed by our manager to what was called Kennedy Street Artists. It was the big agency in Manchester for bands. It was them that persuaded us to record "Girl," which was the Beatles song off Rubber Soul. That was a hit record, but it forever tainted us as a kind of ballad pop band, because we weren't like that at all. That was so out of character for what the stuff we were actually playing and liked.
Yeah.
So it was a good and bad thing. It opened up a lot more doors. Suddenly we were doing a lot of touring, television, radio, lots of gigs. Price, fees went up. But as I was trying to still be a soul blues band, and all the audience just wanted us to play the Beatles hit.
Yeah.
But hey ho, a taste of pop stardom.
What didn't you beat Pink Floyd in that competition as well? Weren't they like a runner-up?
We did, yeah. I think we beat them in the semi-final. I can't remember which round it was, but it was getting towards the final. But I can't remember what they were called. They weren't called the Pink Floyd. I can't remember what they were called. It's Look Up Above, but I can't remember it. So it just shows, you win some, you lose some.
So how did the magazine thing come about then?
That was through Martin Hannett, record producer. I was friendly with him. I'd been friendly with him since about 74 or something like that.
Yeah.
We'd met in Manchester through I can't remember exactly what it was, how we met. Just one of those in a pub probably or something like that. I found out he was a bass player, and I was, doing anything really to stay in music after the St. Louis Union, doing all sorts of cabaret gigs and awful stuff, but it was kind of helping me develop as a musician, because I was being faced with lots of different challenges.
Yeah.
One of the better ones was getting to play with Roland Kirk in Liverpool, the blind American sax player.
Oh yeah, I know him. Yeah.
We were playing in this cabaret club in Liverpool, and he'd been playing at the Uni in Liverpool, and for some God alone reason decided to come to this cabaret club, for a drink after his gig. And again, God alone knows why. He came in. It was really spectacular. We were on the stage playing for dancing, and suddenly these guys walked in full African robes. What that?
Yeah.
It was an amazing sight. There's about 4 or 5 of them, and one of his guys came up to us. Came on the stage at the side and said, "Roland would like to come and play a few songs with you, a few tunes with you." And it was like, wow, amazing. Get him up, yeah. So we played a couple of blues and a couple of sort of standards with him, and it was amazing. We were like, I was 21 or something, 22, and
wow.
Completely out of the blue,
Jazz
legend just suddenly appears in this bloody cabaret club,
So how did you get?
Sorry, we were talking about magazine.
No, it's a good story. It's a really good story. That. So magazine. So how did the songwriting work in that group?
Well, when I joined, a lot of songs have been written because they've already had a keyboard player, Bob Dickinson.
Yeah.
And that didn't work out. And then going back to Martin, we were still in contact, and I just got a phone call, and he said, "It's Martin, Dave. Watch So It Goes tonight on Granada. There's a band that you might find interesting. They're looking for a keyboard player." So I tuned in at 10:30, and it was magazine, and it was very different from the whole punk thing I'd been seeing in Manchester. I was too old for the punk thing, and I found it musically very, very limiting, although I liked the excitement it was causing. And I've always been interested in photography, so I was going down to various clubs and taking photographs more of the crowd than the bands. So to see magazine was a bit of a revelation, because it was so different from the 3-chord wonders or 2-chord wonders of the punk bands. And it was very theatrical, which appealed to me as well because of what I was telling you earlier. So I rang Martin the next day and said, "Fantastic, love it." So it's in between Howard and myself, and I had like a 3-hour verbal audition with Howard before a musical one to see if I guess he thought I was an idiot or whatever. Then And then I did a week of rehearsals with them and got the gig.
Cool.
But going back to the songwriting that you asked for, about a lot of the stuff had been written. The Shot by Both Sides had come out, and that took off during the period I was with them. And then we started to make Real Life, or there were plans afoot to make the album. And I thought I've got to get a song on this album, even though I was contributing a lot to the songs with arrangements that had already been written. So I came up with Parade. By this time, my girlfriend and I were sharing a flat in Disbury with Martin. So I got my synth back at his place, and I came up with the chords and the phrases for Parade. So I managed to get a song on that.
Oh, excellent.
After that, because I was then in the band permanently, it was a lot easier to write songs and contribute. But to answer your question, I mean, Howard always set out very early on that he wasn't interested in anyone else writing lyrics. He was going to write all the lyrics, and the musical side was open to everyone to contribute. So it's quite democratic on the musical side, but dictatorial on the lyric side. But that's fine because he was very good at lyrics.
Yeah.
So no one else was going to be what he was doing. So that worked out from that point of view.
What sort of keyboard setup were you using at the time?
Well, when I initially joined, I had a Hammond organ, a Fender Rhodes, and the ARP Odyssey. The Hammond. Although I've always been a massive Hammond fan, the Hammond and the Fender Rhodes were kind of hangovers from the stuff I was doing prior to joining. And I thought, well, that doesn't fit with this kind of new wave, new sort of approach to music. So I got rid of the Hammond and the Rhodes and bought a Yamaha organ, which was, on a chrome stand and a lot more kind of new wave. Because a lot of the songs really demanded an acoustic sort of piano, so by this time we got a deal with Yamaha, and I got a Yamaha Electric Grand. So I very quickly did the first dates with magazine with that Hammond Fender Rhodes, and then got rid of those and got the other two in with the Odyssey, and got us a Yamaha string machine as well.
Cool.
So that was a basic thing, those 4 keyboards.
So I'm always interested in the early days of bands. Obviously, they were quite well-known magazine, but was it a struggle to get to be seen outside of Manchester as such?
What, with magazine?
Yeah.
Not really, because we were doing a lot of John Peels. We were doing the Top of the Pops, and I don't know, it got to 41, I think. But certainly when the album came out, it got such great reviews, Real Lives, that we were doing a lot of touring all over the country. So no, it wasn't. I wouldn't say that it was particularly difficult to make a name outside of. Although we were, well known in Manchester.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was particularly difficult to get known outside of it.
Cool.
Did a lot of gigs in London and Scotland, and did a lot of touring.
How did you travel? Because I'm always interested in the bands that have these clapped out little vans and struggle to get around. Was it the same for a magazine?
No, we had our initial manager, a guy called Andrew Graham Stewart, that actually worked for Virgin.
Yeah.
And kind of, in a way, prior to me joining the band, Virgin had sort of recommended this manager to Howard. And he had a Range Rover, so we all travelled around with a Range Rover.
Right, cool.
An earlier Chelsea tractor. But Andrew, it didn't work out after a while, so Andrew went, and we got another manager. So then we were travelling in splitters, and so we always travelled pretty well. Luckily.
Okay. So Visage. So it was yourself, Barry, and John, wasn't it? And it was basically, was it like a side project really to begin with?
Well, it was.
Yeah.
Barry and I initially were the ones that started. We heard about the Blitz, and we were living at the time because we'd not long moved down from Manchester. We moved down to Howard moved to London initially, and then we followed about 2 or 3 months later. Barry and I, and then John.
Yeah.
And Barry and I were living in a Muse place just off Harley Street, which we'd found. But we were only there for about 5 or 6 months because the lease was running out. But it was literally just around the corner from Covent Garden and the Blitz. So we'd heard about it, so we used to go down there, and then we met Rusty down there. And Rusty said he was a huge magazine fan. And it kind of, then John started to come down, and he was saying, we've got this project just starting, and we'd love you to be involved with it. So it was by chance in a way, but was it a side project? Yeah, because we were in between all that, we were due to go to America on our first tour there, and we were going to Europe a lot. We were just touring or making an album all the time.
Yeah,
it was a slow kind of gestation. So purely physically and work-wise, it was a side project because magazine was taking up so much of our time and effort.
Yeah.
So it kind of evolved, and I think memory serves, but not quite correctly possibly, but I think we started working on tracks, certainly the initial single, in between going to America and starting on Secondhand Daylight.
Yeah.
And we then, I think we actually went down to Martin Russian's place to record the album after we'd finished recording Secondhand Daylight. But it was still, because then he sat on the shelf for ages after we'd recorded the album. Because I can't remember, Rusty took care of a lot of the business, and Midge took care of a lot of the business side, because we were incredibly busy.
Yeah.
And the first I knew about it was I was walking through Soho, and someone shouted Dave from across the road, and I looked over, and it was one of the managers from the who were looking after Ultravox and took on Visage. And he said, by the way, do you know you got the #1 album single in Germany? I went, no, I didn't. And that's when it became a bit more serious, because Germany being a massive market in the world, third biggest in the world, I suddenly realised that there was money being made here.
Yeah.
And then it took off, in lots of other places, and Australia, and suddenly it was, wow, how strange. We're putting all this time and effort into magazine because that's what we love, and something that was really a side effort is making a lot of money for everybody.
Yeah. So how did it work in terms of putting the songs together then? Because did you record because you were sort of separate doing the magazine stuff and just coming in at certain times, and I think Midge was still with the Ultravox as well, wasn't he?
Yes.
So how did you all get together to make the music? Did you do it all together, or did you do little bits and record them?
No, I mean, mainly there was some, like Fade to Grey had already been written.
Yeah.
But the B-side hadn't. So we got together and wrote the songs in a rehearsal place, and then, it was all done in a couple of weeks, really, the first album.
Yeah.
And I think by the time we got to the second one, it was a similar thing. Some rehearsal time was booked, and we wrote the songs there. But a lot of development was done, actually, in the recording studio.
Yeah.
New parts came up, as they do, and, developed, especially with there being 2 keyboard players. Me and Billy, were contributing a lot in the studio, trying out new ideas.
Oh, interesting. And back to the keyboards, were you still using the same setup for Visage? Because it was
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We hired in stuff, particularly with the second album. By this time, the Fairlight had come out, and various Moogs, big Moogs, poly Moogs, and Billy, because Ultravox had started to take off, had got this super duper deal with Yamaha, where he could basically get the really expensive synths brought in, for as long as he wanted. So CS80s and things like that were brought in. So yeah, we had quite a range. Quite a range really to select from.
Did you ever get to play on the Fairlight?
I did.
Yeah.
In fact, I was really keen to get one in for magazine because I thought there was a massive potential. And I tried to get one in. I went to see Simon Draper, who our A&R guy at Virgin, and I said, look, we really need one of these. And he went, what is it? And I explained to him what it was and said, how much is it? And it was about 26,000. And he went, sorry, too much. So, it was on the same lines as I was wanting to get John Barry in to produce the second album. Virgin weren't entirely against it, but he was a tax exile in America, so it would have meant us going out to California, and they wouldn't pay for that.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, though, wasn't it? So.
Yeah. But no, to go back to did I play one? Yeah. Rusty knew Richard Burgess, the guy from Landscape.
Yeah.
The drummer from Landscape, and he was the UK representative for Fairlight. So I went at the last minute after the first album had been recorded. I went round to his place one day, excuse me, and just recorded lots of little weird stuff that went between each of the tracks on Fairlight. They're like little musical links on Fairlight, which I did.
Yeah. Ah, interesting.
So that was as close as I got, really.
Yeah. Yeah, they were a massive band, weren't they, Visage? They, dominated the charts for a few years, didn't they?
Yeah, well, they did okay, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of royalties still floating around the ionosphere that it would be nice if they go into my account. They probably never will now.
So, how would you say the music, because it changed, didn't it? The style of Visage changed over time. And so it was basically on the album Beat Boy, wasn't it, that you sort of had a musical difference with Rusty? Was that right?
Well, just generally we split apart, really.
Yeah.
It wasn't just Rusty and I, although that was part of it. Billy had gone, Mitch had gone. It wasn't Visage anymore, effectively.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I probably should have moved on before I did, but it was no real effort to contribute something. So
yeah,
path of least resistance until it became just no fun anymore. So that was the end of it, really. We've since we've been on speaking terms for quite a long time now, Rusty and I. So
yeah.
No, I mean, he's tried to. He has, kind of redone Visage with different singers and that. Which, why would you? But
yeah.
I guess he feels that there's some worth still left in the songs and stuff. So he's tried to rejig it and rebirth it. But I don't think it's been particularly successful. But whatever you want to do, I suppose is okay.
Are there any tracks?
Yeah, it was. Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
Go on. I was going to say for John and I particularly, because Barry did, left after the first album. It was good for us, enabled to do certain things that enabled me to open Strong Room, build a studio in partnership with another guy in London, which I was involved with till the early 90s. That was I wouldn't have been able to do that without Visage, So that was something I'd always wanted to do, to build a recording studio.
Yeah.
Which I've carried on. I've got a studio now that I told you I'm in now. So
yeah,
that's kind of what I do these days. Particularly is run a recording studio and record other people and myself's material.
Are there any Visage tracks that you'd have done differently on reflection?
No, not really.
No?
Honestly, I can't think that I would.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I've not really thought about it. It was a consolidated thing in a period of time, that was what it was. And it captured the moment, I think. And
yeah.
It's kind of like, we get lots of requests to remix magazine stuff. And I actually don't see the point, because it's what it was, and that's why people liked it at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, Virgin had a reputation for flogging a dead horse with various projects, and I think that in a way put me off over. Yes, lots of magazine stuff have been released and re-released, but in its original form.
Yeah.
Which I think stands up really well, as does the Visage stuff.
Yeah, I think so as well. It doesn't sound, from that era. It sounds like from today, doesn't it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a good sign, isn't it? If anything.
Speaking.
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it all very much.
So, how would you say that your own style had changed over time to this to present day? As your technique changed or your style changed over that time, would you say?
Well, I guess. Well, you hope that you develop and evolve with your playing as the influences build up and change. But I suppose essentially, I'm still very much interested and play things that are kind of jazz, funk, blues related. With all the times since joining magazine and Visage, with electronics joined into it, so it's a weird mixture of those early influences and things that developed along the pathway.
Do you think there's an over reliance nowadays with bands or keyboard players using libraries and that sort of thing, and presets? Do you think?
I think it can be. It can bland things out quite seriously.
Yeah.
Because there is such a range of choice that I think people, and I have to, be careful myself of, getting too lazy. But if you use them correctly, I think you can do some amazing stuff. I've recently been trying to develop a more, not orchestral, but a more larger ensemble type of music using jazz voicings and strings and electronics all together. It sounds terribly either pretentious or overfacing, but I really try and keep it quite well, try and refine it so it's not just a mishmash of I mean it takes I'm not saying I've got there yet, but I'm quite pleased with the way that this way I'm working on this stuff is developing. I mean, the difference from when sample libraries first came out to what there is now is remarkable.
Yeah.
You get the chance to do stuff that is absolutely unfeasible. That moment for me when I first heard the Fairlight was, Christ, everything's changed from now on.
Yeah.
But then you look back and listen to those early Fairlights, and you think it was pretty crude sound-wise to what is available these days.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's still I'm quite old now, but it's really exciting what you can actually create on your own or with a couple of other people coming in to play bass or add some guitar and stuff or play a drum track for you. So, I mean it's remarkable.
Yeah, it's do you ever do projects remotely, where you're not in the same room as someone, by email or that sort of thing? Do you ever get involved in anything like that?
I know what you're saying. I did. I tell you, the most I've done that was over lockdown. Because you couldn't get people in the studio, quite rightly, and I didn't want people in the studio. So I was getting quite a lot of work with people saying, "Will you put keyboards on this track? Will you mix this track?" Etc. Etc. I mean, not 7 days a week, but enough to keep me busy and keep me interested.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. A couple more questions, if that's okay. So, what do you think about the way that music's delivered nowadays in terms of streaming and that sort of thing? Do you think it's a bad thing or a good thing, or Spotify, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of the reason going back to what we were just talking about, the way that stuff is so formula and so. There was a program on the radio, earlier this week, examining the way introductions on pop records have shrunk rapidly to generally less than 5 seconds. And there's very little solos on records. It's all about, because of Spotify, grabbing attention in the first 30 seconds, or people don't listen to it. Plus, you don't get paid until the first 30 seconds have been registered on the song. I didn't know that either. So it's along with a lot of other musicians, it's pretty tragic, really.
Yeah, it's one thing I noticed about. It's sort of this drum I keep banging about. He was better in the olden days, and what I mean by that is there was a lot more diversity in terms of music. So you could watch like Top of the Pops or something. It was a family thing. It was a thing that everybody did. You'd sit there. And it was just a range of music in the charts at the same time. So you'd probably get a punk band, a heavy metal band, a reggae band, novelty act, all in the charts at the same time. And you don't get that now, do you?
Well, it was, because I was lucky enough to, experience a similar thing in the 60s. I mean, the charts were remarkable. Yeah, there was still a terrible lot of bad stuff in, the Ken Dodds and the stuff, but I'm talking about Ken Dodd being awful, his records. I mean, there was that variety, and it just all, as you just said, sat side by side, and it was part of it, and that was fantastic. And then that's all gone. I mean, to a large extent, it was still there all the way through the 80s as well. Wasn't it? And then again, going back to sampling and going back to, the ability to make records without, virtually hardly any musical talent. And then all the streaming. It's a bad lot of chemistry. And the record companies have, in a lot of ways, can only blame themselves, can't they? Because well. The fact that there's only three really record companies left. It's very, very sad, and it's easy to be a Cassandra and moan about it, but the fact is that that's how bad it is, isn't it? A friend of mine, he's a drummer who is also an audio engineer, comes and works in the studio. He moved to Louth, where I live, from Yorkshire a few years ago, 12 years ago, and my son was in a local band from when he was 13, and he said, what happened to all those lads that created bands, even in a little town like Louth? There aren't any anymore, no one's doing it, and that's only a little town of 20,000. And I'm sure it's, there will be more bands in Manchester and in London, but I'm sure the ratio has dropped enormously because it's so difficult. Probably sound like a moaning old gets, but it's true, isn't it?
I think a lot of the problem as well is that because of things like X Factor and that sort of thing, you get the judges on there are basically from boy bands and girl bands.
Yeah.
And they're teaching people to be like them, where it was
they
all
just propagate it, absolutely.
And it's horrible, isn't it? Because you don't need to play an instrument, you just need to sing. So it's basically karaoke, and I don't know. They don't just sing a song either. It's all that Whitney Houston, where it's trying to fit as many notes in as possible for no reason whatsoever. Yeah,
we're really in agreement with this. Compare that to Aretha Franklin and all those sort of over singing, as you say, get as many notes in as possible. It's pathetic. It's unlistenable. It's the vocal equivalent of sampling, really, isn't it? I don't know. But the weird thing is, hidden away amongst all this, there's still a load of great music if you look for it. It's just that it doesn't get exposed. It doesn't get the chance anymore. You really have to dig it out. There's there's very few. You know, Kerris Matthews can be a little bit irritating at times, but she's also really good. She plays some really good stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, the same for Jules Holland, can be really annoying, but you know, every now and then, you know, he has someone good on that you've never heard of.
Yeah.
And although I fear that his show is not what it was, because it's become so, you know, well, I guess it's been going too long. But yeah, I mean, we're lucky to have a really good record shop in Laos, and the guy that runs it is a real enthusiast, and he, you know, he gets in a lot of stuff that you know you've not heard of before.
Yeah.
And you know, the people that are interested in music really value the fact that there's an outlet for it.
I think that was part of my, but my other thing I keep mentioning as well, to I bore my friends to death with it, but it's what you don't sort of get now is but my trip to a record shop when I was a kid, you know, that was great because you often it wasn't the fact that you could find music you wanted, it was the accidental stuff as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or your mate telling you about it, and then you go down the record shop and have a listen to it. Yeah, I mean, it was a network, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That had a kind of end result. Yeah. It's, I don't know. We used to have lots of conversations. Well, it can't stay like this. It's got to go back to more like it was. But you wonder, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, because I've got an office job. That's my main job, and it's horrible because I've got the radio on. It's always Clyde 1 for some reason, and it's the same. But honestly, I've been there for 3 years, and it's the same music. It's literally the same tracks every day.
Yeah.
And no one seems to care. No one seems to register it. And I think they don't like music. They just don't like silence.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have the importance, I don't think. You know, there's a culture that says that it doesn't matter so much anymore, and people, you know, are quite often very sheep-like, and you know, they just accept that that's the status quo, and don't have the impetus to go out and do anything or find anything for themselves. It's very sad. It's really a bit of a cultural desert for those people, I can only imagine.
Yeah. Oh well, we've got our music, haven't we? So.
The weird thing is, if you're an enthusiast, I don't think it ever goes.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm convinced that there are a real lot of enthusiasts out there. You know, I don't see them so much anymore because you know I'm not going out in the same way. But yeah, I'm sure they're out there.
Okay.
So yeah.
And sorry. Go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, what got you... Are you in Glasgow?
Yeah. I'm English, obviously, but yeah.
How did you become... Well, you could ask me how I became here. But, what's the Glasgow connection? How did that come about?
It was completely random, actually, because I'm obviously from like Yorkshire, and I sort of moved around quite a bit in the UK. And I ended up living in America for 4 years. I married a Yank. Didn't work out. I had a job lined up in Leicester as a lecturer in art, basically.
Yeah.
And so I came over, and then they lost the funding for it, so I found myself with no job and no house or anything like that. But but I had a friend up in Glasgow, so I just came up to visit because why not? And got a job whilst I was up here and just sort of stayed. So it was just completely random. I could have lived anywhere really.
Sure. Oh, it's a lively place, isn't it?
Yeah, I quite like it. Yeah, it's lots of parks and things. You know, it suits me. You know. So how did you get over there?
Well, we had after I sold my interest in Strongroom, the recording studio I mentioned before. After we'd had two children, because effectively I'd had 8 years of making it a success, the studio, but I was only actually getting in to record, fairly infrequently. So I ended up being more of an administrator than a musician, and that after the novelty of getting it to be successful, that started to wear off.
Yeah.
And the recession hit really badly ineffective. There was a lot of studios in London at the time, and the competition became fierce. And record companies were really taking advantage of it, driving the rates down. And my partner, he said the only way out of this, he was much more of a businessman than I, said we've got to borrow our way out of this. And we'd always said we wouldn't put our houses on the line to raise money because we built another studio by then.
Yeah.
We got 2 studios. And he wanted me to put my house on the line to really take out a lot, raise a big loan and really, open up a big development. So I said, well, it's not for me because I've kind of had enough anyway.
Yeah.
So I moved out. And after a while of sitting around in London being, kind of like a house parent with my wife, we decided to move out of London. Because it was funny, we were talking about this the other day with a friend of mine. The Lambeth had the loony left council at the time, and the schools were absolutely dire. The local schools were just in a complete mess. So our eldest kid was coming up to 5. So we thought, well, it's now or never. He starts school. We don't want to take him out of the school. He's made friends out, etc. So we stay in London or we move out. So we looked at lots of places, Brighton, Oxford, all sorts of different places. But my wife's sister was living here. We came up and really liked it, and that's how we came here. So with the money we sold our house for in London, we were able to buy this house outright and me build a studio. So
fantastic.
It kind of made sense at the time.
Yeah.
And it's been great. They loved it here. My lads, 2 lads. One's a pro jazz drummer, lives in Birmingham, and the other one's become like a marketing sort of person who's doing okay. So he stayed in Louth. But Max, the drummer, has gone to live with his wife in Birmingham. That's where they went. That's where he studied at Birmingham. What's the word? I can't remember the word. It's a uni, but it's got musical academies. What are they called? Conservatoire.
Yes, yeah.
He studied there and decided, because of quite a happening jazz scene in Birmingham, so they stayed there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So you got it all. You got my full life.
Brilliant. Just one last question. If you could give a really good piece of advice to anyone wanting to make music now, what would it be?
Just stick at it, because it's more. I really feel sorry for people trying to make it. Young guys, young women. It was always really difficult, but I think you have to be so tenacious and so determined, and just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Because I still believe that if you've got you got to have a certain amount of talent, a huge amount of staying power and ambition, and personality to what people want to work with you.
Yeah.
It's a combination of those elements, and you've just got to stick with it. That's the main thing. I've seen so many people give up at the first or second hurdle, and often the people that do stick at it get there in the end.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's always difficult to give anyone any advice.
I know. Sorry, I always throw that in. But well, thanks, Dave. It's been a really interesting chat. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it as well.